It's now my pleasure to introduce the next presentation. We have Helen Cunningham and Deidre Stuart from the Queen Elizabeth Centre with us today, and they will be presenting What's the Number Today? The silent number behind the COVID number, connecting and supporting families with young children experiencing significant challenges. So Helen Cunningham is Director of Nursing and Clinical Services at the Queen Elizabeth Centre. Helen is a registered general nurse and midwife and hosts an extensive list of qualifications in her field. Helen has worked in the field of maternal child health for over 20 years and in 2017 joined the early parenting services sector. Helen has recently been appointed to a new role at QEC, Director of Clinical Innovation and Development, developed to support the expansion of the early parenting sector across Victoria. Helen is presenting with Deidre Stuart, who is a registered nurse and midwife with qualifications in child, family and community nursing, management and immunisation. Deidre has practiced as a registered nurse for 40 years and as a maternal and child health nurse as well. And in 2018, she commenced working at QEC Early Parenting Residential Unit. From 2019, Deidre was appointed the Nurse Unit Manager at QEC Noble Park. So it's my pleasure to hand over to you both, and I am mindful of time. We do need to finish up at 11:30, so we'll hopefully be able to get some Q&As at the end. We'll see how we go.
Do our best. You hear me nice and clearly? Yeah, so hi, I'm Helen. I'd actually like to start by acknowledging all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as traditional owners on the land in which we walk, live and raise our children. We pay respects to traditional owners, past, present and future, and any Aboriginal people present here today. And we acknowledge the importance of children being raised with connections to culture, community and family. Well, here at QEC, and I'm hoping everyone on knows what QEC stands for, the Queen Elizabeth Centre, is actually Victoria's largest provider of residential and community-based early parenting services. So QEC has a proud 104-year history providing children with the best start in life. Last year, we delivered residential and home-based programs to more than 2,500 families, and 100% of all our residential program targets were actually met. So we provided 975 early parenting programs through the peaks and troughs of the COVID pandemic. These programs included things like day stay, residential, which could be 2 or 4 night stays, play steps and parenting plus. The outcomes that we saw in the midst of all of this in this COVID pandemic was an increased parenting confidence and capacity, some strengthening of community connection and improvement in some health and wellbeing. And our families told us that, 91% of our families had increased confidence in their parenting following these programs. 86% had met all their goals. Our families experienced a positive change in 90% of our programs, and 98% would say they'd recommend our services to others. So quite a testament to think at a moment about that in the midst of a pandemic, but it also highlighted the fact of how important it was to continue to deliver a service. So today what we're going to do is we're actually going to share with you some tips and trips of what worked, what didn't, to actually be able to share such outcomes as that. And we're going to aim to present it through 3 lenses, really thinking about the family, the clinician and the organisation, how they all intersect and how actually it was that critical intersection and understanding that helped us be able to do what it is that we could do. So tip number 1, being accessible. So as QEC had always advocated actually in all our early parenting service programs for a self-referral process. So professionals can refer to our early parenting services, but so can the families themselves. Interestingly, during the pandemic, well, actually prior to the pandemic, we had an average around 65% of our referrals were self-referrals. In the peak of the pandemic last year, 90% of our referrals were self-referrals. During this peak, families just couldn't access other services, and often those services would be the ones that would actually help facilitate referrals to QEC. So an incredible important tip for us was, and success really was, to make sure we kept that avenue open for self-referral. Tip number 2 was about understanding and responding to the needs of our families, and obviously changing needs when you consider everything we've all been through over the last 12 months. The main presenting concerns for families to us were things around sleep and settling for their children, feeding issues, behaviour challenges, pure exhaustion, and yes, the unprecedented prolonged pandemic. And underlying these sort of factors that presented of concerns for families were the issues around mental health, family violence, and isolation. And all three of these increased significantly last year. The isolation and desperation for services was evident in the referrals that we were receiving. So tip number 3 for us last year was responding to that distress, recognising that this was a desperation. So when a referral is received at QEC, so considering, let's go back prior to COVID, if everyone can remember prior to COVID, our referrals would come into QEC and would be reviewed by a very experienced clinician in our assessment and intake team, who would then contact the family and actually start the first line of support through a phone conversation and be able to provide that first level of intervention. Now, prior to COVID, that worked really well, but last year it suddenly didn't. Families weren't interested in a phone conversation anymore. They were seeking much, much more. The desperation and the stress and the isolation and, compounding, obviously, the presenting challenges around their parenting became incredibly obvious. We had to make a change.
Thank you, Helen. So I'm Deidre, Stuart. So one of the things we quickly realised is to make the referral form as easy as possible for the families to find on our website. And so that was just one click. Once they got to our website, it was on the home page. And then it was very quick, easy for them to fill out. If they needed extra help, the staff, that would answer the phone, the reception staff, family experience team, everyone was available to help them fill out that referral form. Because once we received the referral form, the assessment and intake nurse clinician and the associate nurse unit manager would look at that referral form, and in combination with what we call a risk and protective matrix, that we would look at that referral form, look at each, part of the information provided, look at the matrix, and then based on those two things and the expertise of the nurses involved, they would quickly triage them into the most appropriate program. So for an example, this was not uncommon, this sort of referral. It would be a family with a 4-month-old baby, their first baby, who'd been sleeping really well day and night, and then suddenly things had changed. The baby was much more unsettled during the day and night. Both parents were getting really exhausted. They felt they couldn't reach out to their family because we're in the pandemic. And so they sent in a referral. So again, using that system I explained to you about the risk and protective factors and looking at the information on the referral, the clinicians decided on a day stay program, which was delivered sometimes in a flexible model in telehealth and on site, and sometimes only telehealth. Anyway, it was successful because the feedback we would get would be something like this. Was one of the quotes: "Thank you, QEC, for responding so quickly to our request," because often we triage them the same day we got the referral, to help us with our infant son. So I'm handing back to Helen.
Thank you, Deidre. So tip number 4 was obviously to continue to deliver the service. With so many services unable to deliver last year or trying to flounder around of what could do. So obviously it was about putting a COVID safe plan in place. And for us, it was never about reducing service delivery. It was just about how could we do it in different ways. We flipped every one of our programs to a number of options. They could either still be face-to-face with limited numbers of families being admitted to the residential unit to maintain our COVID safe plan. We also flipped our programs to be able to deliver them also fully by telehealth as well. And we also had some programs that we actually did a combination of both. So it was really about what was going to work for the family by offering those 3 different modes. We were very lucky at QEC that actually had done a big piece of work just a couple of years before COVID on our model of care. So QEC's model of care and clinical practice framework really provides a really innovative evidence-based method of conceptualising and delivering and measuring QEC clinical services. We have key 4 pillars, and our outcomes around them are: so nurture, which all children will be connected; protect, all children will be safe; grow, all children will be healthy; and thrive, all children will achieve their potential. And each one of our practice pillars has behind it a set of goals, the focus, the skills, the knowledge, the tools and the measures to be able for clinicians to be able to do their work, but also to see the difference that we may be making. And using obviously an embedded model like that when trying to flip a way that you're going to deliver a program means that you actually do have a really solid framework to work from with clear outcomes, still using the same evidence and the same tools and with that same purpose. And it sort of in a way gave the staff and our families a real strong consistency in a time that was actually of constant change. I'm going to turn over to, sorry, I'm going to switch over to Deidre now, who's going to share an example of that.
Absolutely. So yes, tip 5, recognise the advantages of telehealth. So this was a really, the staff were really capable on the phone, but then we were able to, learn a new skill, and that was provide our service to families using a visual platform called Health Direct. And we also became much more proficient at sending emails of resources for the families to use. So typically each week we, admit 11 families into our residential program. Through COVID, we couldn't bring all 11 families on site. So what we were able to do based on our physical distancing requirements is that we could bring 4 families on site every week, and the other 7 families, we would provide the same program, but using telehealth, in particular the Health Direct visual platform. So we needed to coach our staff and provide training. Some staff jumped at the opportunity and were really adept at that sudden different way of working with families, and other staff, we certainly responded to their request for more coaching and role modelling and support. So, suddenly they were in a family's home, and the family would be showing them where their child or their baby was sleeping, or their, meal times. So, it was all those skills and building on all that skill. We were able to continue offering our program 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, both telehealth and on site. And that was fantastic. So at 3 in the morning, which is often, a classic time when a baby is woken and the family needs help to resettle, the families could either access by phone and leave a message, and we would respond really within a few minutes, or with the Health Direct platform, it created what they called a virtual waiting room. And so a family could just click on a link, be in that virtual waiting room, a QEC clinician would be monitoring that waiting room, and then straight away connect with the family, and off they would go. So I guess what we did notice that sometimes for families, particularly when there were changes in terms of how, whether in changes during the COVID pandemic, for some families, they were expecting an on-site booking, and then there'd be a change and suddenly we couldn't bring everybody in. So for some families, we had to do a little bit of a sell about telehealth, but the clinicians became more and more confident in the program. And it was really easy to say, look, we certainly understand it's not what you were hoping for. We were hoping to come on site, but this is the telehealth program. And really, we are, the advantages are that you're still in your own home, using your own cot and everything, and we are still available to you 24 hours a day, either by phone or a combination of phone and the visual platform Health Direct, or just by Health Direct. So most families went, okay, I'll give it a go. Again, the model of care and practice framework was, our underpinning on how we delivered that service. We could still do group education sessions online using Zoom. And we were really pleased about that because we identified the isolation was a big factor. And even though these were a one-off group, there'd be a few group sessions and these families may not see each other again after, being with us on QEC, it was connection to other families and just sharing a few stories. So I guess one of the quick comments was for the clinicians, for those that sort of struggled with the telehealth and were used to having families on site, one of the things we said to them is try and imagine when you're working with a family on telehealth that they're still there with you. And I know that seems like a simple message, but for some clinicians, that actually helped them to really relax using this visual platform, because that's exactly what they did. They started talking like the family was there in the room with them. Another little tip we learned was for some families, the light shining from the phone or their tablet overnight would be a distraction while they're trying to sell their infant. And so if the family had access to AirPods, the staff could coach them through a settle without the shining light of the tablet or phone. And yeah, so there was lots of little things that we kept checking in with families, checking in with staff, and we would share these little tips that would help us deliver telehealth over during the pandemic. And look, it's continuing today, and we're really proud of what we can do. I guess I just want to quickly share a positive feedback, and we got lots from families. I found the telehealth process really useful for our particular situation. Can't speak highly enough about the program, had the most positive experience. So that's a relief for us, because we would love to bring everybody on site, but that wasn't possible. Thanks, Helen. Actually, I'm on the next bit too. Recognise the challenges of so one of the things we realised was certainly family violence identification and screening. And so again, you know, that's those skills that the staff had to use using a visual platform, you know, let alone, you know, getting used to working with the family in their home. We also needed to make sure that everyone was safe in that home. And so family violence is an integral part of our practice in terms of screening and identification. So it was something that we just needed to really work through with the staff and say, it's really good to do that, but just check out who else is at home. So sometimes it was a straight up forward question, who else is at home? Or, oh, I can see somebody moving in the background, or I can hear someone else is there. So they were really gentle inquiry questions built on a relationship, you know, that we didn't launch into the family violence identification and screening, but we certainly had built on a relationship that included that. And look, I guess there was a few examples where in that gentle inquiry and doing that screening, you know, we did identify, sadly, a few moments where there was some family violence incidents, and we were able to work with the family, ensure the children were safe, safety planning, you know, safe steps. So, you know, the staff are really skilled in this area, you know, and they get lots of support and supervision and training, but they were able to still do this component of their practice over telehealth. I'm going to last bit. Yes, I guess thank you for everyone for, you know, listening to me this whole time. But I think one of the biggest things we did in our practice, and we're a real multidisciplinary team here of nurses and non-nurses who work incredibly well together, is the whole COVID screening. And we certainly learned along the way with incredible leadership about what that meant. So in practice, about a week or 2 weeks before, the families that had been triaged to come on site would get a phone call from a nurse, QEC nurse clinician, to say, look, we're going to go through some COVID screening questions with you, one, so that you understand what's, you know, happening. And we would certainly tweak those depending on what was required, you know, from the state government. So we would talk to them about COVID screening, what was required. These are the things that would happen when you came here on site. And so the families were really informed. And so then on arrival to the program, they would come into the car park here. They knew to stay in their car, to ring the reception. The QEC nurse would come out to the car and again go through those same questions that they were already familiar with prior to admission. And then basically, if the questions were all answered satisfactorily and we answered any of the family's questions, then we brought them into the site here at Noble Park and completed the admission here at Noble Park. So the families, we never really had any resistance to. They really appreciated, you know, what we were trying to do for their safety, for the safety of the staff, everyone else. And so the families were really very engaging in this whole process. I guess just one little example that happened is that a family who'd experienced the pre-admission, you know, education and checklist screening turned up for a day stay program that morning. And as, you know, babies and children can sometimes do, is that, you know, that child had woken up unwell with a runny nose. The parents still arrived for the program, hoping that because it had just happened that we'd still be okay. And I guess through our screening process, we realised, that this is probably, it's not going to, we weren't able to bring that child into the centre. However, we said to this family, we'd still love to offer you this program, but what we could do is we could offer it over telehealth. While it's not on site, we will, you'll still be working with our clinicians, and it'll be, everything that you would get on site, you'll still get over telehealth. The family were a bit reluctant, but we spoke a little bit more about it, and they said, okay, we'll give it a go. And they went home and actually had a great outcome. So, we were sorry that, we couldn't bring them on site, but the fact that we had the flexibility to offer them the same program over telehealth was fantastic. So I'll pass on to Helen.
Thanks, Deidre. We're at the last minute, if you like, so we're nearly there. So if we can finish off the last minute summary, is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So one of the funniest visions I have is that we have to go and find poles and witches' hats and things to mark parking areas for these families every Monday when they arrived. So we'd often see Deidre out there with the wheelbarrow and the poles, getting the site set up every morning. So there was a lot of adaptability, and I think the flexibility and adaptability of how we actually have delivered our programs has taught us a lot about how we move forward, and having that ability to offer programs that are going to work. There are generally some families we've identified now that the concept of coming on site to a residential program is never going to work. The ability to provide now our programs in their own security of their own home is an incredible advantage. And then again, there are other families that really, it needs to be the face-to-face. So certainly that now that learning of being able to offer the program, our evidence-based programs from lots of different platforms, is an incredible value. To finish off, I just want to say one other thing and a tip, and I really think an important one, and that's around about how you maintain and sustain and support the workforce, because this was a critical part of all the success in how this actually all worked for us and continues to work. And it was about keeping everyone informed. It was about engaging everyone in every decision, every little piece of the way along this, embracing the mentoring and coaching and any opportunity to reflect, and providing easy use of guidance. Having that model of care and that clinical practice framework already in place, and helping them understand that you can still do this work. It might be just a little bit of a different way of how you're doing it. And keep acknowledging that things didn't work, and there were lots of things that did not work. But it is incredible to work in an organisation where actually the vision and purpose is never an argument at QEC, and that's certainly made it quite easy to keep that focus there. And the last point really about looking after each other. Never do that enough. And then we have got staff, and I would say one of the things for us in that craziest peak last year when everyone said, hold on a minute, you can't even go for a home visit. There was a point of time. And we have our staff most stressed, not for themselves, but for the fact that they actually couldn't get in the homes and do the work they needed to do. So incredible place, and that the achievements of what we've achieved is through the workforce and actually making sure we are supporting them to support the families. So we hope that was enjoyable. We hope those tips and a few trips there too were of use to you. And and we thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Deidre. I think in terms of what we're all here for today, working on what matters and sharing what works, you've absolutely delivered on that. And I've been getting lots of questions that I wish we had time for, particularly around what you're envisioning your service might look like going forward. You've obviously learnt some really fantastic things, and I think we would all love to absolutely hear what you think might be happening in the future. I'm hoping we might be able to put some of those questions to you privately and then deliver them to our audience when we deliver the rest of the package from today and from Open. So I would just like to, in closing this session, thank everyone that's presented here this morning. We've certainly listened to some fantastic presentations, and I'd also really like to acknowledge our sponsors. QEC is one of those, so thank you again, Helen and Deidre, for representing them, and also Uniting, CSNet, Brotherhood of St Lawrence and Meerkat. So that closes off our session for this morning, and we have lots more to come today. So we hope to see you all later on this afternoon. Thank you.